JD just said something to us on the way out the door, and I agree with him.
He was hot.
Well, great. That's a wonderful thing for sports, and it's a wonderful thing for the Giants because that's kind of new. Like, even just think about the way, if you ever do watch a baseball game, it can be background noise. It's summer. Your flip-flops are on. Oh, this is sixth inning. Oh, it's the seventh now. Okay, what's the score? The vibe about baseball is very, very different than the way we watch other sports. Well, I was in the dugout a couple of hours ago. Bonte was there. Loveman was there.
Yeah.
A lot of dignitaries around San Francisco sports. And I'm telling you, the mood has changed. And so that's what I dig. And JD was just pointing this out. So whether it's you thought both should be back, you thought both should be gone, or you're willing to split the difference like the Giants did, Gabe's gone, Farhan stays. Either way, there's a whole new tone around this. And the word that I always love more than any other word in sports, urgency. That's what it needs. It's what baseball needed when they entered the pitch clock. It's what makes football games so incredible. There are 17 of them. You can't lose and have it be okay. But in baseball, you can go into a week and you're like, if we only lose twice, that's a good week. Baseball has a problem sometimes with urgency.
Right.
And it has been created around the Giants, obviously, as evidenced by the conversation we just had.
Yes, and the urgency for Farhan is you have a one-year deal and you need to make this thing right, and the urgency on the Giants organization is the majority, maybe not the majority, but a large piece of your fan base has tuned you out. And I live with a Giants fan who loves her Giants hat, and I have other family members who are Giants fans, and they, this year, were not tuned in at all.
Yeah.
From game one to game 162, there was no captivation at all in any way, shape, or form. Even when the team was 13 games above 500, it never felt like this was something that you had to watch. And that's a big problem.
Listen, I want to make sure everybody understands the conversation we just had in the crossover. What you just said, you have my 1,000% full agreement.
Yeah, and I know that.
And I am completely aware that most fans are not like fans like me, who I love to get home from work and make a little dinner and turn on the game. 6:45, turn the game, and it's on, and it's on all the way until low man goes to sleep, and that's our process. And I love that. That's not to say that I can't tell that the Giants are way too boring, or maybe a better word that did come up in the press conference today, disconnected. And there is a fair concern to have right now when Farhan says things like DeSclafani's going to be in the rotation.
Oh, boy.
Or the majority of the roster is going to be back. Or we are operating as if all of the opt-in, opt-out guys are going to opt in. There's a fair concern when he does answer the question, even though I somewhat agree with him, when he says, we believe it starts with wins and then the fans come. That's a fair concern. I also do think this, based on being in that room with him today. I think Farhan's going to go out of his way to promise a hell of a lot less this offseason, because I think he slipped and fell into it sounding like that last year.
Sure.
I know people, he promised they'd get big free agents.
Right.
He didn't say that.
No.
But it sounded that way. And so we went into the offseason with these huge expectations, and Judge and you and I are out in Linden, and everybody's freaking out.
Wow.
Right? And they end up with Michael Conforto and Mitch Haniger. And so it struck me today. He's going to go out of his way to not promise or sound like, we're very optimistic going into free. He's not going to say anything like that this time around.
Right, but the rat on the table brought to you by Atco Pest Control is that he has to go out there and do it. So say it or don't say it, it doesn't matter. We all know the reality. You're on a one-year deal. You have no extension. He addressed it today, and you've got to not only get better, but get more interesting and get more exciting. And the way to do that is by bringing in some hitters, because your offense this year was not good enough. And your attendance, I'm looking right now at ESPN, they were 17th in Major League Baseball in average attendance, and that's not good enough. And I know that your park is not the biggest park, but in terms of percent capacity, they were at about 70% capacity the majority of the year, and that's not going to get it done here.
Shout out to Bags. He asked him, so I know that you dive into a lot of the data and the metrics. Is attendance one of them? I loved the question. And Farhan said, absolutely. And he said, I understand that people are voting with their feet to a certain degree. This is all paraphrasing, but there's no doubt that came up in the conversations with what's happening next. I do think, however, Farhan is going to, and maybe this is the only way he knows how, and maybe it does mean it's his last year with the Giants. He's going to battle that. I'm not saying he won't go get a big player, trade for a big player. I'm sure he's going to try. But Farhan believes, it was clear to me, that his way out of that mess is to win. Not to win the offseason.
Sure.
To win the regular season. And, with that, I'm without saying that I don't want great players, high-priced players. I do. But I agree with him on that front. I would rather win the regular season than the offseason.
I don't believe that is the cure, though, for absolutely solving the attendance problem. I don't believe that is the cure for that. And looking at 2021 is unfair because we were coming out of a pandemic, and I went to a number of games where it was, okay, you have these 4 seats, and then there's nobody for 8 seats, and there's nobody in the row in front of you. It was very limited in terms of attendance. But if you go back historically, even to 2016, the last time they were really good before the pandemic, it's not fair to look at those measurements either because the city was a different place and the world was totally different. So you kind of have to do it in a leap of faith standpoint in terms of, will winning fix the attendance problems? I'm not sure if it will. I look at San Diego, and they were 3rd in the league this year in attendance, and they won 82 games. And I know it's a one-sport town, so it's a little bit different because if you're a San Diego sports fan, you have Aztec football, and you've got the Womback over-the-line softball tournament.
Yeah.
You got some soccer, and you got the Padres.
I do love the soccer down there. They love the soccer.
No, they love it. Yeah. And there's a lot going on there. But in terms of major league properties, this is it. But they had a team that was attractive. If you wanted to go out and watch a team that was mediocre or even not very good for the majority of the year, you at least had Soto and Tatis and Machado and Snell and Darvish and all the rest of them.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying I'm not jealous of some of the players they have.
Sure.
At all. I just, I think, put it this way, I'd much rather watch an overachiever than an underachiever. But first and foremost, I'd like to watch an achiever. So,
sure.
Yes, the perfect idea is, Dodgers and Braves. Have really good players and then really good records.
Yep.
But second to that, to me, is really good record with some players, as opposed to got great players. We don't have any wins, but we got great players. That's all I was really saying in that conversation.
I get it. The attendance figures would show you that the second level of what you're talking about is really good players and not wins. The Yankees were second in attendance, and they stunk. And it's because it's a huge market. I know that. And it's a big brand. But also they have guys like, let's go see Aaron Judge, even though they stink.
Well,
and no Pulse Parlos Giancarlo. I think I got that wrong, but I was close enough to.
No si Parlo.
No si Pos. No si.
Gosh, no, it's Stoparlo.
No si Pusto Parlo Giancarlo.
Giancarlo.
He's always there for me.
Stoparlo. Yes, exactly him.
What did I do wrong?
I butchered it.
Yeah,
but they were second. In St. Louis, they were terrible. They were 4th in attendance.
Big baseball town. And
so,
one sport.
But again, that's where we look at. Well, they have the Rams still, kind of. But they got the Blues.
They're mad at the Rams.
St. Louis Blues on
fair.
ice.
That's
but
fair. That's fair.
And coming up in all these teams, you look at Houston, they're good. Philly, they're good. Atlanta, they're really good. And then you get all the way down to the Giants, and they're down with Cincinnati in attendance. That's unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's because you're boring and you're mediocre.
No, there's no question. Yeah, absolutely. By the way, and we're going to go to the phones on this in just a sec. 888-957-9570. Anything to say on this conversation at all? Here's the attendance response from Farhan.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you look at, the number of confounds that we're dealing with as an organization, a lot of what's happened over the last 10 or 20 years, but kind of people vote with their feet, right? And as a baseball group, I think it's our responsibility to put a compelling product on the field. And we've talked a lot about how, if you win, that usually drives attendance. And I still think that's true. So, from where we were in August, if we had played better, if we, had a chance to clinch the playoffs during this last homestand, would the attendance, would the energy have been different in the ballpark? I think almost certainly. So, I continue to think that's our primary responsibility, just win games, because that's what fans want. That's what's going to attract fans to the team.
So I'm going to mostly agree with him, but also lodge a concern with Star Command. I got a concern in there, which is he referenced this year. I agree with the overall concept. Sort of like if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
If you win, then attendance will go up. That's obvious. But then he referenced this year. He's like, yeah, like if we had played better in August and we had won 6 more games and ended up in the playoffs, I think this building would have looked a lot different. Also, not factually wrong. However, Farhan, you don't think that this team was going to be good enough, do you? Even if they had scratched their way into the playoffs. And I think that, for me, is the discord that remains between Farhan Zaidi and the fan base, which is, yes, make the playoffs, but you also have to at least feel, I think, as a fan and as a player on the team, you got to feel as if when we get to the playoffs, we got a shot. You play the Braves and the Dodgers, and I don't care what their record was against them this year, even though it wasn't all that great. Not against the Braves, but I know they played them tough. But come on, you cannot look at their roster and this roster and think that you're playing the same sport. You just can't.
And I think that winning, as it relates to attendance, is more of a September thing than it is April through August. And, if you're a Giants fan and you want to be, going to a game, you're more interested in who are you going to go see. You're not looking at the standings like, okay, we're 6.5 back, and this is a big game, and we're 2.5 out in the wild card, and it's August 4th. Okay, I'm going to go because I'm feeling the urgency. Even though there's 47 games left to go, I think you go, for the most part, to look at stars, and I'm looking at the attendance figures right now. Miami, playoff team, 29th in attendance.
Yep.
Tampa, playoff team, almost every year.
I know.
27th in attendance.
Those two markets do not dig baseball.
Right, but even when they're good, and Tampa is good, Tampa's always good, and Miami this year, they're young and exciting and good, and they average 14,000 a game. And I know it's a different situation.
I mean, have you ever been to Tampa and seen the baseball
situation? I've been
situation?
to Tampa. I've never been to a baseball game. I went to an arena game in Tampa.
It's like across the really long bridge. Like it's so far from...
It's brutal, Tampa St. Pete.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I flew to Tampa with the SaberCats and forgot to bring pants.
Oh.
So I wake up in the morning.
It's like forget your toiletries or something.
I had pants. I had like jeans for the flight, but I needed slacks.
Did you have some on at the time?
So I go into the luggage. I got no pants. So now I got to go out to Brooks Brothers.
Okay.
And it's like 6 miles away. And I go to get in a cab. This is pre-Uber. And it's one of those 90 days.
Oh, yeah.
90 degrees and 90% humidity. And your boy is dying. To say I'm pitting out is an understatement.
Well, I mean, if it's humid, it's nice to not have pants. I would think that helps.
It would have.
Yeah, that's.
I was trying to be professional.
Get a little air going.
I was like a young Grandy or a young Giddings. Tampa's brutal, so I get that.
Yeah,
but I think the point,
not a baseball state. It just isn't.
No, but even though like teams who are good don't necessarily get that attendance bump.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I do think in a market like this that traditionally, historically, has loved its baseball. You put a good product on the field, and when I say that, I just mean a good team. You're going to do well. Do you need some recognizable, whether it's personalities or just people the fan base feels connected to? Of course you do. Of course you do. No one's arguing against that. I just do. I wonder what is sort of, I guess, priority A. I want both. You want both. Everyone wants both. When we're saying both, we're talking about big name players and winning.
Exciting and good.
Great. I want both. We all want both. But if you're going to give me a choice and I got to pick one over the other, or what's really driving the bus, is it being good or is it being exciting? I'm going to give the nod to good. The Padres did really well attendance-wise. They should. They got a great ballpark. They're the only game in town, and they do have players who flash on a screen. But I can also tell you, I mean, you know this. You know that I used to work there, and I've got I've got very close friends who are running post-game stuff with the Padres. People are mad.
Sure.
Mad at that team.
But they showed up, and you vote with your feet, and they drew 3.271 million this year. They were third in Major League Baseball. And so it's interesting what you say, because the Giants are also the only game in town. The Warriors season is Warriors is October to April.
No.
And Giants are April until
then that's saying that every baseball team is only game in town.
In terms of this town, and you can't tell me that the Giants are suffering from a lack of foot traffic because of the pandemic, and then also say, well, they're not the only game in town.
Oh, no, I blow off the whole foot traffic pandemic thing now. I think it was a thing 2-3 years ago.
Right.
It's not now. That's no longer an excuse.
Well, then you have no excuse other than the fact that you're boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
no one's arguing that
your
this year.
ballpark is as beautiful as San Diego's.
Of course.
And you won almost as much as they did.
I'm just arguing the whole only game in town thing. The entertainment dollar is spread based on what's going on. Are you traveling during the summer? Are you saying, okay, kids, and in fact, this happened with my kids just last week. They're like, can we go to a Niner game? And I'm like, no. Not because
it's going to be a no from you, Dad.
But it's just because of work. It's because I got the show on Sundays.
Man.
I can't do it. And the other nights are school nights, and it's far from where I live and all that stuff. And immediately my daughter goes, well, what about a Warrior game? I said, oh, that's happening multiple times. But you see how the entertainment dollar gets pulled. They're not playing necessarily at the exact same time. The Warriors aren't playing yet. But
Giants don't play in October.
No, they don't.
We know that.
Not this year. Hey, Drew in Sunnyvale. Let's going on?
Go to the phone.
Let's go, Drew. What are you doing?
Well, what am I doing? I'm listening to you guys, and I listened to that entire crossover segment. Good points made by both sides. I think, I think how Giants fans are feeling, it's in a little bit of the middle, and I'll explain that here shortly. But I think the biggest problem with the Giants over the course of Farhan's tenure is that there were no recognizable names on the Giants, right, over the course of that tenure. And what I go back to is actually 2008, right? In 2008, the Giants did not have a very good year. In fact, it was a very bad year. But there were names of people you could connect to. Tim Lincecum, Matt Cain, Brian Wilson, Pablo Sandoval. And then Buster Posey came 2 years later. We all know what happened after that. But there were names that you could connect to. There was a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's all we're asking for as fans. We're asking for the light at the end of the tunnel. And when we don't necessarily want the Ohtani or the Judges or the Trouts necessarily, but we want people who will be on the team and we can connect to, right?
It's so interesting, though. Yeah, Drew, go ahead.
Elliot Ramos, when you send Elliot Ramos up and down the farm system, you do the same thing with Luciano and Matos. This is what happens, right? And I just don't feel like guys like Lamont Wade and Mike Yastrzemski are the guys that we necessarily connect to just because of the way that they got on the Giants in the first place, right? So that is really my main complaint is that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. There's no future vision.
Drew, thanks. That's totally fair. This is so interesting, right? Basically, he's saying that you can't be that guy if you're acquired via trade. Lamont Wade and Mike Yastrzemski had done nothing in baseball until they came to the Giants. Maybe they haven't quite been successful enough to be that guy, and people all go buy jerseys and whatnot.
Well, they don't have that guy. Yaz would be the closest thing to that guy because people will buy his jersey.
Right.
But he's pre-arb 3. Logan Webb is here. He's been signed to a 5-year deal, and they showed him the money.
Homegrown.
Yes, and Yaz, he's here, but he's almost an indentured servant.
That's kind of the key. In
baseball.
Look at a guy had a really good year, and he's been a Giant for a long time. Wilmer Flores. why is Wilmer Flores not someone who people go, yeah, that's our guy?
Do you do a Wilmer Flores impersonation?
I don't. I can do his batting stance, but that doesn't work on radio.
I do an impersonation, and it sounds a lot like my Andrew Wiggins, so I'm not going to do it. So I'm not trying to beat this thing into the ground. But
save it. We got a big basketball season
that's the
coming.
point. Is like Wilmer is not a guy who.
Yes,
he's
that's fair.
We don't see him a lot. We don't hear from him a lot. He is quietly efficient, and he's your best hitter, but he should be your fifth best hitter.
But Hunter Pence was acquired, and I thought he became a guy. He became a guy that the fan base connected to. So it doesn't have to be homegrown.
No, but he had a catchphrase and he had a nickname and he led you to a championship.
Yeah, he had a speech. Here's where I'll agree, and I think Farhan does too. He has stated publicly now a few times they're going to look to more long-term contracts. And that's how you do it. That's how you do it. Even some of the guys who've been here a long time, you don't necessarily know. Like Wilmer's been re-signed once or twice. So it's like, yeah, he's been here a long time, but we didn't know he was going to be here a long time. So that's fair, and I do think you're going to get some of that.